This video is going to shift the narrative from fear to expansion. Rather than seeing retirement unknowns, things like your finances, am I going to have enough money? How am I going to handle healthcare? What's my social circle going to look like in retirement? As a threat, we're going to see those as possibilities for new growth. By leaning into the discomfort of new experiences, whether they're good or bad, that's going to effectively allow us not to just survive retirement, but to slow down time. As I was preparing for this video, I realized this should probably be a series. So if you haven't seen our previous two videos, we'll link to them. And if you want to subscribe, feel free. That'll give you the rest of the series that are coming up. But if you watch those two previous ones, that'll kind of give you the full picture. You don't have to be retired for these to help you. If you're preparing for retirement, doesn't matter what age you are, if you're working towards retirement, things in here are going to help you as you work through that journey. And if you are already retired, there are some lessons in here that we all can learn.
Away we go traveling.
Comedian John Heffron says people in their 50s are just adolescent old people. I don't know that I fully agree with that. My brain still tells me I'm 20, but my knees sure know that I'm in my 50s. But basically, we're the freshman class for the elderly. And as freshmen, we probably need a freshman orientation. You know, your freshman year of high school, your unknowns were who were you going to eat lunch with, or how do you find your 6th period classes? For us, our new unknowns are probably maybe finding a doctor in a new city, what we're going to do on our first Tuesday morning without a job, and how we're going to handle making new friends without our work environment as our stable base. So we're discussing all the new challenges that we're going to have in retirement. Just like your freshman year, there's thousands of things that you have to learn. There's thousands of things that we need to learn in our early retirement, our retirement, or preparing for our retirement. And if you go back and look at how you grow through your 50s by exposing yourself to these new things and orienting your mind in a new way, you look back in your 40s and realize how much you've grown, how much you've learned, all the new skills you have because you were not afraid to lean into these unknowns. As you would in your senior year, if you look back on your freshman year, you say, man, I don't even recognize that person. And that was in 3 short years. We've got 30 years of retirement, hopefully, for most of us. We want to be able to look back and realize we're very different than the freshmen we were in the early adolescence of our retirement. Okay, the first big unknown that all of us will deal with is our financial unknowns. And I think some people avoid this unknown, or they avoid it as best they can by just deciding to work as long as they can. I'm going to work until 67. I'm going to work until 70. I'm going to work until the day I die. It doesn't matter what it is. And they're just essentially avoiding dealing with that concept. If I work as long as possible, I'll make as much possible money as I can. I won't have to worry about the financial side of retirement. However, the problem with that is, if you look at the statistics, in particular in the last few years, between COVID and this AI boom, in the survey of people they talked to that said they wanted to work to 67 or beyond, about 40% of them were sort of let go, kicked out of the workforce 5 years before that. So on average, a lot of those people at 40% are being let go at 62. So now they're having to face this financial challenge without having prepared. They're getting kicked out for physical reasons. They can no longer physically perform. They've got health reasons, which are always a big challenge for us in retirement. They've got a skill gap. Their job has just passed them by, or maybe this AI boom that we're going through has basically pushed them out of a job. It doesn't matter what the reason for having been pushed out of your job early, the potential for being moved before you choose to is real. So rather than let that problem come to you, let's face it head on. Let's take a look at some of the things we can do. For example, let's determine what our spending is going to be in our retirement years. How much do we actually need to live? Then let's do that reverse math and figure out, okay, if I know how much I need to live, how am I going to make that amount of money to be able to support myself? What is my Social Security check going to be? There's calculators for that. There's calculators for determining how much money you should have to support your spending in retirement. And maybe you've determined my spending in early retirement is not going to work for where I live. So I'm going to have to do something else. I'm going to have to move to a lower cost of living area. I'm going to have to potentially move to a lower cost of living country. And there's some fantastic retirements you can have in other countries, whether you're traveling full time or whether you're just passing through or whether you decide to become an expat and stay there. So you have options, but the key is let's look at those options early. Let's look at them when we're in our 40s, in our early 50s. So when we get to the point where we want to retire in our mid 50s, our late 50s, maybe even our early 60s before Social Security has kicked in or before we get, our healthcare options, but at least we know what those are. It's no longer an unknown. It's no longer scary. If you head this off and you look at it and you say, I can solve this problem, and you have it determined before, it's not a scary problem anymore, and it's no longer an unknown. We've beaten the financial unknown. All right, next up is healthcare, which is usually our number one or number two concern when we're talking about, how are we going to retire? How are we going to, especially if we're going to try to retire early, sometime before 65. And in our previous video, we did an extensive deep dive that talks about your healthcare options, both in the US and outside the US for people who are not yet able to get Medicare in the US. So, if you're interested in the healthcare, no kidding, what are your options? Go back and watch that video. It's got a lot of great information for you. But essentially what we have is we have options for whether or not we're managing our finances, which we talked about in the previous section, managing our finances in our retirement to keep our adjusted gross income low enough that we get our ACA subsidies, whether we're comfortable traveling full time and using traveler's insurance. Those are options, whether we're comfortable moving to another country and using their healthcare options that are there. That's also a possibility. It doesn't really matter, but the long story short here is there are options for people prior to 65 if you need healthcare. And that unknown, if you take a look at your options and you decide what it is you think you want to do and have that in your back pocket, that's going to make being able to retire before 65 significantly easier. So rather than not knowing and deciding, I'm just going to work until age 65, until I can get Medicare, and then I'll pick that up and that's how I'll retire. If you have all your options in place before, it makes you significantly more flexible. Now, let's say you get into early retirement and you pick something and you go, I hate this. This is terrible. Well, guess what? You've learned a valuable lesson. You've leaned into the unknown. You've expanded your comfort zone, and you've learned, that's not for me. And that's okay. Sometimes you make a decision, the best decision you can, based on the information you have available at the time. You make the decision, you determine it wasn't for you. Well, guess what? Go back to the drawing board, try again. You can iterate through this process and you can learn what is the best option for you. Kara and I talked about in the last video that we will very likely, almost 100% chance, cycle through multiple types of healthcare during our retirement. And that's okay. We're doing what we're doing now, and we may change in a few years when we change the way we travel. We'll make the decision that's best for us at the time. But the key is we've evaluated those decisions. We know what's available to us. So for you, same thing. Know what's available to you. Make the best decision you can now. Make the best decision that fits in with both your financial and health goals, and then set your retirement date. All right, next up, we have our relational changes that are going to happen in our retirement. And these are things like, well, you just spent the last 30 or 40 years working, and there was a significant amount of your social interaction that occurred at work. What are you going to do when that disappears? Are you going to keep those friends? Are you moving to a new location and you won't have the opportunity to talk to them anymore? That's a concern. You have a second concern. Unless you work from home the entire time and your spouse also worked from home, or maybe you work in the same location at desks right next to each other, you're going to have a lot more time with your spouse. And it's going to be different time. It's going to be time where you have to think of things to do together or be comfortable doing things separately. It doesn't matter what that is. That's going to be a challenge. That's going to be something new you have to evaluate. And those are problems you should definitely think about before you retire. Another one in this category, what are we doing with our now elderly parents? And they're not getting any younger. We're not getting any younger. They're not getting any younger. For most of us, hopefully they're in good health. They're out living their best lives and we don't have to intervene. But at some point in our retirement, we will likely have to deal with aging parents. whether that's a medical concern or getting them a new location that they can live if they lose a spouse or if they can no longer take care of themselves. So these are things you have to think about in your retirement. How are we going to handle that? Do you have siblings? How are they going to play into dealing with your parents? Because you can't just abandon that as a concept and say, I'll deal with that when it happens. Like anything in life, it's always better to take a look at that and have an idea of what you're going to do before. These relationships are complicated. You spent a long time, and in your late 40s and 50s, you were the most productive. You made the most money. You probably had the most seniority. You had titles. You had power, so to speak. You had authority over other people. And that change is going to affect you. Now, in my case, it didn't affect me at all. I thought it would. Zero problems with it. Some people, depending on where you come from, that might be a huge problem. Same thing with the spousal changes. Kara and I had a whole bunch of time together now. Now, fortunately, we had talked about this before, and we have our own things where we get time away from each other and get our own me time. I think that's super important. But we also enjoy being with each other. So, with your spouse, make sure you talk about that and know what we're going to do once you're both in the same spot at all the same time. So these social changes are real, and you just want to evaluate them. Use those, again, as a way of growth. How do we grow socially in our retirement? If you look at the older people in their retirement, just like us, we're in our freshman year, we're still in orientation. Our older people in the retirement communities, the people that have been retired for 5 years or 10 years or 30 years, they've established their social circles. Just like the senior class in your high school, they had all their friends. They knew where they hung out. They knew which restaurants they went to after school. They knew which clubs they were part of. They knew who was in their group. We can look at the people that are far ahead of us in retirement and use them as examples because they are the senior class. They've been through orientation. They know how to handle this social aspect of our retirement. You have options too. You don't have to stay where you are. If you don't want to full-time travel, that's okay. Maybe you spend some time traveling 3 or 4 weeks at a time. You make new friends out on the road. You meet people in new places doing the same thing. You have a common goal. You have a common theme at that point. You have something that you can now talk about. You can build friends that way. So you have options. You don't have to just stay, in your own neighborhood and have the same group of friends. When you've decided to expand your social circle, you're taking your social rubber band and you're expanding it just a little bit. And like a rubber band of a certain age, like we are, when you expand just a little bit, it doesn't snap all the way back. You've made that social circle just a little bit bigger. And every time you expand it, you give yourself a bigger pool of people to pull from. I mentioned in my 1-year retired video, there's a couple videos back, that you need to define your new pull. And you can certainly do it once you retire, but there's nothing wrong with taking a look at that unknown now and trying to decide what your pull is going to be, what it is that's going to get you out of bed in the morning, what it is that you're passionate about in your retirement, because you should be. These are the best years we have left. Do fun things. You had 30 or 40 or 50 years of working, and during that time, that was the majority of your pull. It was why you got up in the morning, to do your job, to make your money, to hopefully someday retire. So you're going to have that pull now, and it's okay to evaluate it before. And like we talked about a few minutes ago, you may decide my pull is going to be building houses for Habitat for Humanity. That's a great way to motivate yourself in retirement. But then you may realize once you start doing it, I don't like building houses, or I have shoulder pain and I can no longer swing a hammer. You're allowed to iterate. You're allowed to change what your pull is, but it's also okay to have sort of a list of those things. These are the things I've wanted to do for my entire adult working life, and I haven't been able to. I've always wanted to volunteer at a dog shelter and walk dogs every day. It's a great opportunity to do that. I've always wanted to learn how to paint. I want to learn how to play the guitar. It doesn't matter what your pull is. Start listing out things that you think can be your new reason for enjoying your retirement and how you're going to do it best. There's literally thousands of activities that you can do in your retirement. And Kara and I have chosen to full-time travel. It gives us endless, and I mean endless, opportunities for decisions we have to make and things we have to decide and determine every day. And that's been really fun for us, trying to defeat that unknown. It's not about having a crystal ball. It's about knowing that you're your own solution to all of your unknowns. You're the one who gets to decide all of this. Whether you're determining your financial issues, the healthcare gap, what you're going to do in your social circle, it doesn't matter. You're pulling on the edges of your rubber band every time you do that and expanding that comfort zone just a little bit. Your world gets bigger and your stress goes down because, now you've decided that your capacity for what you're comfortable with is bigger. When you have more things you're comfortable with, you stress less about them. It makes your life easier. You can defeat each of these unknowns by just hitting them head on, spending some time to evaluate and determining in each case what you think you're going to do. So in our next video, we're going to expand further on this concept of expanding our comfort zone and what that does for you. And a little bit of a hint, the big thing it does for you, it actually slows down time. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.